Oh, whoops. I didn't even pay attention to your
You didn't let me finish. It's okay. It's okay. Okay. So, welcome back to Dark Roast. It's been a minute since we were here, but we have somebody with us here today, and who will be here on episodes going further is our co-host on Morning Coffee, Marilyn.
Hi everyone.
So
sorry, I was gonna say I should do one of those like celebrity entrances like they do on Ellen, where I'm just like, oh my gosh, yeah.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we should do that. But because she's here and she's to simply say a scaredy cat in some things, I'm going for a non-super scary story to tell today, and that is the mysterious disappearance of Amelia Earhart. Now, you said you didn't know who she was, right?
Okay, so funny enough, I didn't. Whenever you messaged me, it's not like her name was like, oh my gosh, oh, that's her.
Yeah.
But it's so crazy because then the day after I told you that, I was walking in Target and I saw a book and it had that same name, but it was a little kid's book and it was her and there was a plane or this little thing. And I was like, and then I had to do literally like I backtracked and I looked at it and I was like, oh, that's who she's. Okay, so
yeah,
I do have an idea.
Okay.
Now. But yeah, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm just gonna go through some background information real quick of who she was, and then we're gonna go to the actual story of her disappearance. So Amelia Earhart was an American aviator or plane pilot, a pilot who set many flying records, and she was like a champion for the advancement of women in aviation. And she was the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean, the first person ever to fly solo from Hawaii to the mainland. And then during a flight to circumnavigate the globe, Amelia Earhart disappeared somewhere over the Pacific in July of 1937. Her plane wreckage was never found, and she was eventually declared lost at sea, but her disappearance remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the 20th century.
Wow. So she was flying over the Pacific and she disappeared and they don't know what happened to her plane because there's no evidence that her plane.
We'll get further into it.
Okay.
But there's a lot more to the story. I just do want to preface, if you guys want to go like super in depth, I just literally went through the bare minimum of information right now. If you guys really want to go super in depth, there's like a 2-episode arc on this podcast called Astonishing Legends. It's episodes, I believe, 3 and 4. It's like a 3-hour recording of them going over her disappearance, like everything that went into what happened, and then all the theories going about it. Again, I'm just going over the main points here because I don't have time to do all that research. But let's just go over who Amelia Earhart was. Amelia Earhart was born in Atchison, Kansas on July 24th, 1897. And then in December 28th of 1920, Earhart and her father visited an airfield, and she was given a ride on a plane. It was only a 10-minute airplane ride, and it was like a $10 ride, so it wasn't very much. It was a lot back then, I think, but for us, it's nothing. And she said, after the flight, she said, by the time I had got 200 or 300 feet off the ground, I knew I had to fly. And so after that, she was like immediately like, okay, I'm going to do this. This is what I'm like born to do. And so she began flying lessons in January of 1921. So just literally, a month after, she was like, I'm ready. This is what I'm doing. And so she passed her flight tests in December of 1921. So it took her a full year and earned a National Aeronautics Association license, becoming, I believe, the 16th woman in history to do it.
Oh, wow.
Number 16, yeah. So not very many women back then. But that's why she was so like big, because of all the things, like she had all the records she had broken and everything that she had done, and she was one of the early women to like accomplish anything super great within the aviation field.
Okay.
And then 2 days later, she participated in her first flight exhibition at the Sierra Aerodrome in Pasadena, California. So again, like I said, she set a number of records in her short career. Her first record came in 1922 when she became the first woman to fly solo above 14,000 feet. And then in 1932, she became the first woman and second person after Charles Lindbergh, who also has an astonishing story, like he was kidnapped because he was such a big celebrity. Yeah. We'll get to that in maybe a different episode, but that's also a good story to go to. She was the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. And then she did another flight later that same year, a nonstop flight across the United States, leaving Los Angeles and then landing in New Jersey. So yeah, it was a 19-hour flight, and she did that nonstop by herself. Yeah, so
Wait, what happens? I know this is a crazy question, but what happens if she use the restroom?
I mean, they have like bathrooms on there, but they're not like bathrooms. Like again, the planes that we know now are nothing like the ones they were back then.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But if she's one flying it solo, how do you just get up and?
Well, you usually have somebody on there with you, so you have like your navigator and some like more crew members, so they could probably take over for her for a little bit while she just
didn't fly it solo.
Well, I think there's like a majority, you did the most, you're good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got you.
Stop trying to find loopholes in her accomplishments, Marilyn.
Oh my gosh.
It's supposed to be dark roast. It's not funny.
Oh, you're right.
Just kidding. Go. What's up? Oh, no? I thought you had something else.
Oh, no, we're good.
Oh, okay. And so then in early 1936, Earhart started planning a round-the-world flight. Although a lot of people had done it before, she was going to make it like the longest one by flying on the equator rather than just,
Oh, okay.
Around. So it would be 29,000 miles. So it was a little longer than what other people have done. Sorry, I'm real close to the camera. Than other people had done. But it was actually a very dangerous thing. I think they said like a lot of people died trying to make that flight. And so she was trying to accomplish that. So on June 1st, 1937, Amelia Earhart took off from Oakland, California on an eastbound flight around the world. And it was actually her second attempt. Because her first attempt, she had become, sorry, I just lost what I was saying.
Oh, you're fine.
Yeah, sorry. No, that was right. Yeah, it was her second attempt. So for this, she had said that this was like to kind of like study the art of like flying long distances and stuff. And so she was being, what's the word for, there was a certain college that was giving her money.
Like she was being sponsored?
Yes, there you go. She was given sponsorships and stuff. And so they publicized her plane as a flying laboratory. But in actuality, there was like a little science anything on there because she needed so much fuel on her plane. So there was no room for anything of the science nature. So she was kind of, I don't want to say she was lying about it, but that wasn't really the main reason that she was flying. There's a lot of reasons people say that this was this like was even done in the first place. A lot of people say it was because her and her husband had like lost a lot of money. And so they needed to make money real quick before, and she also needed to create press for her new book that she was going to release. Also, there's one including that it was something related to one of the theories I'm going to get into later, but that the president was kind of the one who told her to go. She was really close friends with Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was president at the time. But we'll get further into that later on. So, again, she had to have people with her, right? Like you said before. So Earhart chose Captain Harry Manning as her navigator for her first attempt. And Manning was not only a navigator, who was also a pilot and a skilled radio operator, and he knew Morse code. Now that's going to become important because he was the only one that knew Morse code, because she also had somebody else with her who was named Fred Noonan,
Mm-hmm.
and he was chosen as a second navigator, so kind of like a backup because he brought some other things that the first guy couldn't do.
Yeah.
And so they did a first attempt to fly, and so they made it to Hawaii. But when they got to Hawaii, there was some sort of like maintenance that they had to do on the plane.
Mm-hmm.
And so they stopped there, they stayed there, and then when she tried to take off again, they actually crashed.
Oh.
So yeah, so they had to scratch that plan.
Mm-hmm.
They came back, and then Manning, who was on the flight with her, said that the main reason for the error was pilot error.
Mm-hmm.
Others say that they saw a tire blowout, but he is saying like that was pilot error, like she messed up. And so a lot of people
But like messed
think
up
that
how?
I don't know how to fly planes.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like she just did like a wrong calculation, or she wasn't that great of a flyer, you know what I mean? I mean, obviously she is, because she could do all that stuff.
Yeah.
But there's also other stories where she crashed quite a bit.
Okay.
So I guess it's kind of just depends, she wasn't amazing. So all it depends how you want to like say she was. I'm gonna just say she was a good pilot because she did all that and I could never do that. So you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah. So with the airplane severely damaged, they obviously couldn't fly. So they brought the plane back to the mainland. They did some, like, they fixed it up a little bit. But in this case, Manning decided not to go. And there's a lot of people that think he didn't go because of that pilot error in that first attempt. A lot of people also say he didn't go because, he was also part of the U.S. Navy, I believe.
Oh, okay.
So he had like asked for leave to go on that flight, and it just didn't work out, and so they called him back.
Okay.
I might be saying what he was in kind of wrong, but he was in some sort of other branch that they had let him go, and so a lot of people are saying he couldn't go again. Others saying he was too scared to go with her again because they had crashed that first time. So that's kind of the only reason I really brought it up. So
who went instead?
Noonan was also on that first flight.
Okay.
So on that second flight where they left, it was just her and Noonan. So it's just two people.
Okay.
Yeah. And so Noonan does not know Morse code.
Right.
And so on this second flight, they're using all the same plans that they had from the first, attempt that they had. And Manning was the one who had set up all the communications with other people. And he knew Morse code, so he was going to communicate with them through Morse code.
Yeah.
But they didn't change that on that second attempt where Noonan was doing it. And neither him or Amelia knew Morse code. So they couldn't really communicate with other people.
Yeah.
So that's also going to come in very important when it gets to the part where they disappear. So on the second attempt, they flew to Miami and then down South America, Atlantic to Africa, and then East India and Southeast Asia. And then from there, they reached Lae, New Guinea on June 29th. And when they reached Lae, I might be saying Lae, it's Lae. Once they reached there, they had flown over 22,000 miles.
Did they stop at any point, or they literally just flew?
Yeah. No, so they made a few stops, so those the ones I list: South America, the Atlantic to Africa, and then East India. So they had made stops along the way. Okay. This is one of their few stops that they had to make on the way through there, so they had to refuel and stuff like that.
Okay.
And so they had flown 22,000 miles, and they only had 7,000 miles to go before they reached Oakland, which was going to be the end of their flight path. So Earhart and Noonan departed Lae for a tiny island called Howland Island. Sorry, this sounds confusing coming out of my mouth. Which would be their next refueling stop after New Guinea. When they left Lae on July 2nd, sorry, I'm getting these dates mixed up. July 2nd, it was the last time Earhart was ever seen alive. She and Noonan lost radio contact with the U.S. Coast Guard, Ida, Itasca? Itasca. Again, not great with pronouncing words. Which was anchored off the coast of Howland Island and disappeared en route. So a lot of people are saying somewhere, in between that Noonan lost sight of like their path, because the way he did it was they timed it for his flight path, and so he would know like where he was at, and that's how he was able to navigate. And they were supposed to stay in contact with the U.S. Coast Guard on that ship, but again, that Coast Guard ship only communicated with them through Morse code, or that they could only hear them, but they didn't have a two-way communication line with them, so they couldn't like talk to them and stuff. So it was a lot of like, I feel like it was a lot of miscommunication between them, and it just didn't help that they also got lost.
Okay.
So when they disappeared, Franklin D. Roosevelt authorized a massive 2-week search for them, but they were never found. And on July 19th, 1937, Earhart and Noonan were declared lost at sea. And so since then, many scholars and aviation enthusiasts have proposed a lot of theories of what happened.
Yeah.
The official position for the U.S. government is that Earhart and Noonan crashed into the Pacific Ocean, but there are other theories regarding their disappearance. So I'm gonna just name 3.
Okay.
I wanted to go through the background kind of quickly, just so we can get to the fun part.
Yeah.
The theories. So the first theory is a crash and sink theory, which is Earhart's plane ran out of gas while she was searching for Howland Island and crashed into the open ocean somewhere within the island. Over the past few years, there have been several expeditions in an attempt to find the plane, but nobody has ever found it. And so that's just the main one that people go with, because you can't really say it's not there.
Yeah.
Because the ocean's so deep and wide,
Yeah.
could have gone anywhere. But I think that's the most safe idea to go with. The next one is kind of proposed by a main group, which is the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, or TIGER. And it's the Gardner Island hypothesis. So they say that Earhart and Noonan veered off course from Howland Island and landed instead 350 miles to the southwest on Gardner Island, which is now called Nicamaroro, in the Republic of Kiribati. Oh, I'm sorry for anybody I'm saying that name wrong. Which at the time was uninhabited. Well, my words are not coming out. But a week after Earhart disappeared, Navy planes from the USS Colorado searched Gardner Island, and they didn't see any signs of like anything. The only thing they saw was the wreckage of another
plane
ship. Another ship that had crashed in November 1929, which is that of the SS Norwich City. But they didn't see any signs of Earhart's plane or any other people. Tiger believes that Earhart and perhaps Noonan may have survived for days or even weeks on the island as castaways before dying there. And since 1988, several Tiger expeditions to the island had turned up artifacts and anecdotal evidence in support of the hypothesis. So they say they've found things, and some of these artifacts are a piece of plexiglass that came from the Electra's window, and the Electra is the name of her plane. And then a woman's shoe, which was dated back to the 1930s. Some additional tools that they could have made, some makeshift tools that they could have had. Also a woman's cosmetics jar from the 1930s again, and then a bone that appeared to be part of a human finger.
Oh wow.
But although they have that evidence, not all people corroborate with that story. So there's some evidence suggesting that, that bone was actually, it was proven that it was to be from a child that had no genetic link to Amelia. And then the shoe that they found was actually a man's shoe and not a woman's shoe. So although they have that evidence, you kind of want to take it with a grain of salt, because they also have this other evidence saying, hey, what you have isn't
Isn't
real.
actually thing.
Isn't what you think it is, yeah.
Yeah.
And so and then in August of 2019, ocean explorer Robert Ballard, who found several ocean wrecks, including the Titanic,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty cool, started searching for Earhart's aircraft off the island, the Gardner Island, or the Nicomero's Reef.
Mm-hmm.
The search was funded by the National Geographic Society.
Mm-hmm.
Although he completed his expedition in October 2019, after several days of searching, he did not find any evidence that her plane was there. And he said, well, not he said, but his chief operating officer for the expedition said, we felt like if her plane was there, we would have found it pretty early in the expedition.
Yeah.
So, although they believe they have a lot of evidence for her having crashed and for them to have lived there a little bit, there isn't really that much supporting evidence, in my opinion, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
that it's actually where she crashed.
Okay.
So, one of the more far out theories,
Mm-hmm.
well, there's another one that's a little crazier, was that her and Noonan were actually spies for the US government.
Really?
Yeah. So they're saying that they used this flight to, spy out on those islands out there to like figure out what was happening. But obviously, we'll get to it. And so, in one of the evidence for this is in 1966, a CBS correspondent, Fred Gorner, published a book claiming that Earhart and Noonan were captured and executed when the aircraft crashed on the island of Saipan. But Saipan is 2,700 miles away from Howland Island. So it's a significant difference from where the island is located of Saipan and then from Howland Island is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the thing that kind of keeps people from thinking that could be true, because they would have to have refueled in order to get there, and there's not any stops in between there.
Okay.
So, and then there's also like another theory that they went to a different island rather than Saipan, which is Marshall Island, which is a lot closer.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like that's a way just to be like, hey, this still could be true. This is a better idea. But the thing with this theory is there are a lot of eyewitnesses. So yeah. So there are people who have claimed that they saw the execution of Earhart and Noonan by the Japanese soldiers. There's even, and this is further in that Astonishing Legends podcast where they go through like every single eyewitness account. But there's one of, US soldiers going to the island, finding her aircraft, and then like also finding like her passport and her birth certificate and all the information that she had on her. And then, being told, hey, destroy it. Nobody can know that they were on this island. We're just going to leave it as a secret that she was lost at sea. You know what I mean?
Why? But they wouldn't know that they were actually spies, I guess?
Yeah, so it's kind of like, it doesn't look great that you send out a spy to go search on these other islands and they got caught. You know what I mean? It's a secret mission. So I feel like it was a lot to save face. If that's the real thing that happened, it was just to save face and just keep it as a mystery that people would kind of recount for years and years. And then a slightly different version of that Japanese theory is that the Japanese capture theory is that they were actually shot down. But there's again a lot of people who claim they saw that crash. A lot of the thing is, a lot of these the Japanese crash theories or whatever are based on eyewitnesses. And as we know, eyewitness testimony isn't always the best because our mind can play tricks on us and we can believe things that we want to believe, you know what I mean?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So it's a more far out theory, but the amount of eyewitness testimony is kind of makes you think this could be a possibility, you know what I mean? And then my thing was when I heard this theory, it was like the soldiers that saw it. who were coming back years later and going, hey, and it wasn't just like one soldier, it was like two different people who didn't know each other, both seeing this plane, and then both like recounting every single story to the detail correctly. But they've also sent out people to that, like the site of where that plane was seen,
Mhm.
because they said that they destroyed it and burned it and buried everything,
Mhm.
but they haven't been able to find where that plane is. So it's kind of like, hmm.
But if they burned it, wouldn't it be like ashes?
Yeah, but I mean, some things I don't think you could bury. I don't think you could burn everything. You know what I mean?
Oh, I see. Hmm.
Because it's a giant plane. Then again, I don't know what planes are their flammability back then,
Melted it.
right?
We got melted.
So one of the theories that a lot of people kind of bring up, and I feel bad for the woman who's in this, is that they actually just assumed an identity and just didn't come back as Amelia Earhart or whatever. So in November 2006, the National Geographic Channel aired an episode of the Undiscovered History series about a claim that Earhart survived the world flight and moved to New Jersey, changed her name, remarried, and became Irene Bolam. This claim originally began with a book called Amelia Earhart Lives, which was written in 1970 by Joe Kloss.
Mm-hmm.
So Irene Bolam was an actual person. She was a banker in New York City during the 1940s and denied being Earhart to like the end. And so she actually filed a lawsuit requesting 1.5 million in damages and submitted a lengthy affidavit in which she refuted the claims that she was Amelia Earhart. So like, because she was getting pestered by people, like, "Hey, you're actually Amelia Earhart," and people constantly being like,
Mm.
you're not actually who you say you are," and people are like, "No, it's me."
Yeah.
But
Oh,
yeah, nobody knows where that plane went. Nobody knows what happened on that plane. There is a girl, I can't remember her name at the moment, who claims she intercepted one of the signals from Amelia Earhart's plane,
mm-hmm.
where she was saying New York City, New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like, and like I've heard, I didn't hear pieces, but like people say that, how we brought up that Norwich City crash earlier?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of one of the pieces of evidence for that, because Norwich City can kind of sound like New York City if
Uh,
things are all jumbled up. So yeah, that's another piece of evidence that was like on the island, but you know,
it's crazy.
yeah. And so like, it's just weird to think like, where can that plane go? Where could she have gone?
Oh, I know this isn't scary stuff. But people missing gets my skin all. Ugh.
Yeah,
That's
it's like the not knowing what happened and
well.
stuff.
I
That's,
mean, we could just all assume she's dead.
I mean, well, at this point,
Like,
but
sorry. We were talking about this whole missing thing, and then David walked in out of nowhere and scared
uh,
me. I was already on edge, so.
do you have one theory that you like prefer? I guess.
um, I think, well, it all kinds of. I think that really that last one is a stretch. I wouldn't assume that she would take on a new identity. Um, I, yeah, I think that one's a little too on the outrageous side. Or they would have to. I would have to hear a little bit more on, like, I guess her past or something like that, or her
Hmm.
relationships to kind of bring about, like, why would you really need to what's it called, take on a new identity. um
Yeah.
but I think between obviously the first one, the safest one, about just like not being able to find it, especially because the ocean is so big, and water transports things, so you could
Hmm.
search in one area, but it could be washed away or it could be really deep. So I think the first one would be like, okay, you could tell me that and I would believe it and be fine with it. um the one about them being spies, though, wouldn't like if for some reason they found even more evidence or something and
Hmm.
David tomorrow on the news they said this is what would happen, I wouldn't be surprised. Like I would be like, well, it is the US, so you
Yeah.
know.
No, yeah, I feel the same exact way. That's why I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happened. I
Yeah,
mean, the US is, you know,
they do a lot of shady stuff,
I,
so yeah.
yeah.
So
So
yeah.
I mean, and then again, like it was close to war, I believe, right during that time. Honestly, I don't know anything. I'm not great with history.
After it would have been years after, a couple years after. Wait,
Okay,
what year was that? 19, you said?
1937.
I was thinking 1914. I'm not.
So it's a little off.
I'm gonna scooch up this way a little bit because
Okay.
laptop's dying a little bit. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that the idea that they could have been spies is not as far fetched as we would have thought so long ago. With
Right.
like the reality of things coming out over like what research has been done. Like there's some more stories I want to tell you about like, you know, research that government has done on things.
Mm,
But it, back then you'd be like, oh, this crazy conspiracy theory person is making up things because they, they just want to believe in the craziest thing possible. But now with all the information that we have at our hands that are available,
yeah.
the possibility is actually a lot higher.
Right. Yeah, I think for me, it's true, right? I think there's so many things that you're told and you're taught and you just kind of
Hmm.
on. And then as time passes by, as you hear about new things and then or like you see new evidence or you hear a different perspective, it makes you wonder, it makes you think. Um, and I think what I've done recently is, for example, I, I'm telling you, sometimes I feel like I live in a bubble. I didn't realize how big of a deal it was that there were people who truly believed that the whole landing on the moon was fake.
Yeah.
So once it occurred to me like, oh, people are really defending this, then, I think initially my reaction was like, oh, okay, crazy people, and then like moving on. But then,
Hmm.
it's almost like let me humor them. Let me see where they're coming from, and
Yeah.
you tell me why you think that. And then, and just with a bunch of all these different theories, it's like, in the end of the day, like if it doesn't change my mind, then it doesn't change my mind. But
Hmm.
it's interesting to kind of like, okay, let me put myself in your shoes and you tell me why you think this way. I saw, I think also, this on a YouTube channel, a conversation um between like scientists, or there's another word for it, and like just common people, and they were talking about why they believe that the earth was flat versus people who believe, the scientists who believe the earth was round.
Yeah.
And when I first looked at it, I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. I wasn't a fan of how that conversation went down because I feel like both sides could have really supported their cases a little better.
Hmm.
Um, but it was interesting. What I'm trying to say is it was interesting to see how each side brought about, or how they went about trying to support the reason why. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was worth watching just to get a feel for like what each side believed and why they were throwing facts at each other the way that they did. But this just goes back to your theories. There's different theories, and when you formulate a theory, you have to be very good about like, what are you bringing to the table? What are you offering?
Hmm.
And how good can you be to counteract somebody who
Yeah.
questions your theory? So
Yeah. I mean, like, we'll probably never know what the actual story is or where she is. I mean, it was just kind of sad. But like a lot of her, what I read was a lot of her family actually believes the Japanese crash theory or like capture theory. And so I'm like, well, what other information do they know that and makes them think that that could be a possibility. Besides,
Yeah.
I mean, it has some strong evidence,
Mhm.
but there's also it's kind of weak.
Mhm.
But then again, the easiest, like the most probable one is that okay, she crashed
Yeah.
and she's lost in the ocean. It's like okay, well, what?
But then there could be also I think you mentioned this, that theory of they weren't necessarily like tortured, they were shot down. Like that's pretty
Hmm.
probable too, because if you're like flying over an area and you have
Yeah,
island and it's like, oh, like what's going on, shoot it down and then
yeah. I mean, and then again, you can communicate through the radio, but if she was having trouble communicating with like the US ships and stuff, how was she gonna be able to communicate with, the people on the island if she didn't know how to communicate? Because Morse code, I think, is very I think it's well, like used.
Mhm.
I don't
Well,
know.
maybe they intercepted her connection, the people in the island. See, I could throw in a bunch of new theories. I don't
Yeah, go.
I just learned about her not too long ago, but I can just throw more at you.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy. I feel like you always build up on something and come up with a new theory when you
Mhm.
don't know
Right.
what exactly happened.
Yeah.
I think that's just what's gonna happen with her story until the actual truth comes out. Like
Let it
there's a whole bunch of books going like, oh, this and this happened, or like why this other story doesn't come out, and they're all labeled the truth about what happened to Amelia Earhart. Well, I mean, we don't know the truth. We haven't found her plane. We haven't found, any evidence linking that yours is entirely the possibility of what happened. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Hopefully, in our lifetime, it happens and we can find her plane. That'd be exciting.
Hey man, we've learned within this year that in our lifetime we
A
have
lot can happen.
experienced, yeah, quite the stuff. So
Yeah.
let's not throw that out of the window.
Mm.
You never know. I
But
mean,
yeah.
they're always discovering new things, like
Hmm.
on the news, like, oh, they just found remains of this, and then it proves certain things. I guess if you're not aware of it means nothing, but if it's something that you're a part of, it's like a big.
Yeah.
But
But yeah, that was a story of Amelia Earhart and her mysterious disappearance
there you go.
and all those theories.
Let us know which theory you believe in, or if
Yeah. Or if
you,
I didn't name the theory that you believe in,
yeah,
I'd be welcome to discuss it. You know, I'd do my own research, obviously, but
yeah, cool. Well, we will see you for our morning coffee episode. Check it out. It's awesome.
yeah, I get emotional. I get emotional.
Got this. And we get inspired.
Yes, inspiration. So, I mean, hopefully this was a nice little break of taking your mind off things,
Hmm.
but
See you on the
hopefully it
next.
wasn't too scary.
True. All right.